In 2000, Catherine Knight, a former abattoir worker, committed one of the most horrifying crimes in Australian history. Her partner, John Price, had finally decided to leave her after enduring years of abuse. But Catherine had other plans. Late one night, after a brief reconciliation, Catherine stabbed John 37 times while he slept. He managed to escape the bedroom but collapsed and died just outside. What happened next is beyond comprehension. She skinned his entire body meticulously, then decapitated him. She cooked parts of his flesh alongside vegetables and served them on a plate, each labeled with the names of John's children. She planned to feed his remains to his own kids. Thankfully, a concerned neighbor noticed something wasn't right and police arrived before the children came home. They then found John's head boiling in a pot on the stove and Catherine unconscious from an overdose. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The first Australian woman to ever receive that sentence. Catherine Knight did something so disturbing, it's actually hard to wrap your head around it.
In Haitian voodoo, right, there's this entity called Papa Legba.
I've never heard of this.
He is basically the whole like guardian of the crossroads, and he's like the protector of the crossroads. But what a lot of people don't know is that in American Horror Story, when they made the episode about that guy Papa Legba or that spirit, there was some paranormal that went on
In the actual show?
in the actual show, and it happened to the actress. Her name was Gabri Sidibe. Basically in the episode, she was a human voodoo doll. So whatever happened to her, it literally would like cast and injure somebody else. And in the episode, they made her character say a real life chant to summon this spirit or to summon the devil. I'm not sure exactly what it was for, but they were summoning something.
That's what they were playing in the show?
Yes, bro. After they did that chant, there was scratching noises trying to get into her camper while they were doing her makeup and stuff. So the big studio lights started flickering. When she finished saying the chant in the episode, her mouth started swelling up.
What the?
So we all have to say these words. I refuse to say it, then I feel bad. I'm like, fine, I'm gonna say it. And I start feeling a finger here. I don't say anything to anyone because everybody already thinks I'm crazy. The finger moves down, down, down. All of a sudden, what happened, ladies? My top lip, the other lip, 5 times bigger.
It's known as Crime Watch's most creepy and disturbing reconstruction ever, so don't say I didn't warn you. Let's watch it, then I'll explain the story.
At 6 o'clock that morning, this man was walking his dog near the woods, past the spot where Michael's body was found. He saw nothing there, but then just round the corner, something odd happened.
My dog's usually quiet, and she saw this man standing over there, run at him, and barked at him hysterically. The man was standing there, absolutely immobile, and looked as if he was hypnotized under the influence of something. He was not moving at all. It was absolutely unreal how the man stood there and did not react to my dog, who was attacking him and barking at him.
So essentially, a man with his dog minding his own business at around 6 a.m. in a park in Highgate, London, came across a rigid man who he felt looked like he was in a trance. And he was pretty frightened by this, so he swiftly left. So let's rewind to what happened prior to this, and then we'll circle back round to what happened after and the discovery of a body. It was August 1988, and Michael Williams was living in London. Now, he was 41, he had a daughter and a wife, as you can see above, and they were a lovely little family. He was a really loving, devoted husband, and the couple went to church regularly, and he worked hard. On the August bank holiday, he was actually working overtime to try and get some stuff finished at work, and at 6 p.m. his wife called him in the office to say, what time are you going to be home? He sort of guesstimated that he would be back at around 8:15 p.m, but like I feel a lot of guys do, he finished at work and then decided to go to the pub with his colleagues. They stopped off at Paviour's Arms pub in Pimlico, and everyone who was there that night said nothing seemed off. It was at around 11:15 p.m. when he eventually decided to head home. Michael and a colleague decided to get the underground together home, and his colleague actually left him on the train at Victoria Station because he needed to get on a different route. This obviously left Michael to carry on his journey alone. Now, Michael was headed home via the Northern Line to Highgate, and I actually get this line very regularly. He lived quite near to Highgate Station, and we really know nothing of his movements following this. You know, there are a few sightings, but nothing actually officially confirmed to be Michael. What we do know, though, is he never made it home. So at 7:40 a.m., so over an hour after the man with the dog had that weird encounter with the staring man, another dog walker found Michael's body. He'd clearly been robbed. He had no money, no cards on him, and a very precious Rolex watch was even stolen off of him. And this was a very distinctive, like, personally made Rolex as well. Now, a post-mortem confirmed that he had been killed with a single violent blow to the throat, which honestly, in my whole time of covering crime cases, I don't think I've ever heard of that before. It seems very distinctive. Interestingly, the body was not there, or at least it hadn't been seen to be there before, by a park keeper who'd opened the gates earlier that morning. Now, this led officers to believe that maybe the body was dumped there afterwards from a car. And some interesting information came through to police. Michael's credit card had actually been used by someone dining in an Indian restaurant the day after he was killed. This restaurant was in Southgate, which actually isn't too far from where Michael lived. And Crime Watch showed that eerie reconstruction in the hopes that people would come forward, and somebody actually did ring in stating that they knew who that mystery staring man was. However, when the call handler tried to get some more information, the line mysteriously went dead. The police put together a reconstruction of what this man sort of vaguely looked like, and people tend to argue about whether this was actually Michael or not. The Rolex Michael had been wearing at the time, as I said, was very distinctive and kind of personally made, so it is believed that this could potentially be key to solving this case ultimately, but as of now, the trail has gone cold. Really, nobody knows who this mystery man stood in the park was. Some think this may have been Michael, some think it could have been a body strapped or propped up, which would explain the kind of lack of movement and that vacant stare, but some think it may have been the killer. Let me know what you think in the comments, because as of today, this is still unsolved.
It's scary when people vanish, yes, but what's terrifying to me is when someone disappears on vacation in a place they've never been before, and the last known footage is of them acting really strange. That's what happened to Lars Matank. He disappeared in the summer of 2014 after going on a vacation to Bulgaria, and for some reason, during that trip, he began acting incredibly paranoid. He was last seen running out of the airport into the forest, and this footage is so disturbing to me. Lars has become known as the most famous missing tourist in the world, and how he and so many others have just vanished into thin air without leaving behind a single clue really needs to be studied. So let's talk about it. Lars Matank was 28 years old when he mysteriously disappeared in 2014. He was born and raised in Germany and lived a pretty normal, quiet life. He worked at a local power plant and had a handful of really good friends and a girlfriend. He was living a pretty good life when his dad suddenly had a stroke. So after that, he pretty much spent every evening over at his parents' house helping his mom take care of his dad. They'd always been a pretty close family, but this really made them lean on each other and become even closer. But like anyone in their 20s, Lars wanted to travel and get a break from his regular life. At 28 years old, he had never once traveled outside of Germany, so he and his friends started planning a summer vacation. They settled on an Eastern European vacation to Bulgaria, and on June 30th, 2014, Lars and 5 of his friends boarded a plane to Varna, a seaside resort town on Bulgaria's Black Sea. They all stayed at Golden Sands, which is a really popular seaside resort just outside the city of Varna, and at first, everything was going great. They were having so much fun swimming in the pool, relaxing on the beach, and going out to local clubs and bars that their trip, according to them, was going by so fast. Lars seemed like his usual self, relaxed even, and in a good mood. Although his friends did say that he wasn't eating that much during the trip, which was odd. Lars would reportedly only eat small portions of food at a time, but overall this didn't seem like anything to worry about, so they carried on having a good time. But it wasn't until the last part of their trip that things started to get strange. On July 5th, 2014, just 2 days before they were all supposed to fly back home to Germany, Lars and his friends were at a local bar in Varna when, out of nowhere, Lars got into an argument with some other Germans who were at the bar. The argument was over football, or soccer to those of us in the States. I guess Lars took the sport very seriously, and the argument was serious enough that he and his friends left the bar and went to a nearby restaurant. It wasn't long after this, though, that Lars took off by himself, and his friends wouldn't see him for the rest of the night. The next morning, though, Lars made his way back to the resort, but his friends were a little shocked at his state. Lars told them that he had gone to a McDonald's after splitting up with them the night before, where he was then beaten up up by 4 men. It's not clear whether these were just 4 random men or if they were the same men that he'd gotten into an argument with. But now Lars had an injured jaw and a ruptured eardrum, which was concerning to him and his friends because you really shouldn't fly with a ruptured eardrum. The pressure changes on a plane can further damage your ear, so Lars saw a doctor for this, and the doctor did advise against flying home the next day. The doctor also prescribed him an antibiotic called cefprozil. His friends were really worried about Lars, so they offered to skip the flight home and stay with him until he healed, but Lars refused, saying that he was okay and that they should continue on with their plans flying home on July 7th. So that's exactly what they did. He checked out of the resort at the same time as his friends, and then after, he checked into Hotel Color Varna for one night. The hotel wasn't the best, and it was in a pretty questionable part of town, but it was cheap and not far from the airport, so it seemed like an okay option. But not long after checking in, Lars began acting paranoid. He quickly called his mom at the hotel and was pretty frantic, but he was whispering that 4 men were trying to kill and rob him, and he also said how the hotel was so strange. He was so paranoid that the people following him got a hold of his bank information, so he asked his mom to cancel his credit cards for him and to look up the medication that he was taking. His poor mom was really worried about him, and she said that she could literally hear his heart beating through the phone. Throughout the rest of the day, Lars was seen on security footage at the hotel pacing up and down the hallways, looking out windows, and even hiding in the elevator. He was so paranoid that people were following him, but the odd part is that no one else was ever caught on the security footage. At around 1 a.m., Lars left the hotel and returned about an hour later, but what he was doing in that time frame is still a mystery. When he woke up in the morning, he called his mom once again and said that the people who were out to get him were getting closer. But despite this, Lars made it to the Varna airport on July 8th, 2014, which was the day that he was supposed to be flying back home to Germany. Once there, he texted his mom that he arrived at the airport, so this made her feel a lot better about the situation and kind of calmed her nerves a little bit. She sent him $600 in cash, which he never withdrew for some reason, and bought him a bus ticket for once he got back to Germany. But before he boarded the plane, Lars wanted to make sure one last time that it was safe for him to fly with his ruptured eardrum. So he visited the airport doctor, Dr. Kostov. Dr. Kostov examined Lars and gave him the okay to fly home, but Lars reportedly wouldn't leave his office. According to the doctor, Lars was acting nervous and erratic, and he asked the doctor about the medication that he was taking because he was concerned for some reason. It's important to note that at this point in time, the Varna airport was being partially renovated, so it wasn't unusual for construction workers to be roaming about, and that's exactly what happened that day. As Lars was talking to this doctor, a construction worker walked into the doctor's office, which made Lars tremble. Lars then yelled, quote, "I don't want to die here. I have to get out of here." End quote. Before running out of the office. He left behind all of his luggage, including his wallet, phone, and passport. He was last seen on security cameras sprinting out of the airport, climbing a fence, and then running into the forest that's adjacent to the airport. After this, Lars vanished, and he's never been seen again. He was eventually reported missing, and there was a massive search for him, yet not a single clue was ever found as to what happened to him. With no luck from the police, Lars's mom hired a PI who checked every hospital in the area for any unidentified patients, but came up empty. So although we don't know what exactly happened to Lars after he ran from the airport that day, or what caused him to start acting paranoid, there are a few theories. Theory number 1 is that Lars suffered from some rare side effects from the medication that he was prescribed. This antibiotic can induce psychotic effects like hallucinations and paranoia, although it really isn't incredibly common. Some think that Lars was suffering from some kind of psychotic episode from this medication, which does align with his unusual behavior. But one thing that kind of disproves this is the fact that the airport doctor said that Lars hadn't even taken his medication. According to the doctor, Lars never even filled out his prescription, so his behavior, in his words, couldn't have been a result of that. It's weird that Lars called his mom and asked her to look up this medication, and then told the doctor that he was concerned about it if he never took it though. But to this day, it's not clear if he actually took it or not. Another theory is that Lars suffered from a mental breakdown of some sort. He didn't have a history of any mental illness, but he could have been going through a manic episode from something that was undiagnosed. The most confusing part of this case is the fact that we don't know how much of Lars's story is rooted in reality. No one really knows what happened after he left his friends that night, or if a fight really even took place. No one saw this fight, and no one has ever come forward about witnessing it or being a part of it. So whoever Lars claimed to have been beaten up by that day has never been found. His friends back then also reportedly didn't know how truthful Lars was with his story, because it appeared he gave different accounts of what happened when he was alone to a lot of them. Another theory is that Lars suffered head trauma or or maybe even had a concussion from being punched in the ear. And maybe he just ran off not in his right mind because of this and possibly died of exposure. Or maybe a wild animal got him. The area where he went missing is pretty big, and he did run into a forest, but it's just odd that he hasn't been found by now, or any of his clothing for that matter. I feel like there would be some sign if he was attacked by an animal at some point. People from this area say that it is littered with cameras on every business and a lot of homes, so the fact that he wasn't ever captured on any footage after leaving the airport is terrifying. Another theory is that Lars was met with foul play. We know that Lars said that he got into a fight that night, but it is possible that he got into a fight with some pretty bad people, and the situation was more serious than anyone thought. That maybe his paranoia was real and he really was being followed and watched, and then whoever it was struck after he ran out of the airport. And the last theory, one which his mom believes could be a real possibility, is that Lars is out there, alive somewhere. She believes that there's a good chance that he lost his memory and is just living somewhere not knowing who he really is. This was kind of backed up over the years following his disappearance when multiple people came forward and claimed to have seen Lars in several different countries. A more serious sighting was in 2019 when a truck driver picked up a hitchhiker in Varna. He later found out about Lars' disappearance, and it was then that he realized the person he picked up really resembled him, just an older version of him. Now he had long hair and a beard and really prominent cheekbones. Some think that he could have ran away to start a new life, but I doubt this. You have to remember that this was his first ever trip outside of his home in Germany. He wasn't an experienced traveler, and I feel like he would have felt overwhelmed running away, especially leaving behind his mom, who he was really close with. And he also left behind his passport, so he wouldn't have been able to get far. It seems likely to me that he could have had a mental breakdown, but even if he did, where is he? The fact that he's never been found is insanely sad and scary, and the fact that no one really knows what happened that caused him to start acting strange. But it's now been 11 years, and whatever happened to Lars that summer day remains a mystery.
She escapes with a second to spare.
Hey, yo, Rich.
The drama unfolded at 2 in the morning when the woman arrived home from a long day at work. She says she noticed the stranger lurking outside her building.
So the 50-year-old woman who was seen in that video has to this day still remained unidentified. And on September 23rd, 2021, she was returning home when this man suddenly decided to charge at her. The woman later claimed that she had seen the man and a friend hanging out acting sketchy at the base of her apartments, and that if she hadn't have locked her door the same way that she did and gotten in the nick of time, she still doesn't know what could have happened. I mean, this video is honestly horrifying. I can't imagine someone chasing me to my apartment door and barely being able to lock the door in time to keep them outside. Who knows what this person would have done if they had gotten into the apartment with this woman? It's really frightening. So police at first had no idea who this guy was, but they eventually identified him as 42-year-old Orisha Lucky. And he had 37 prior arrests on his record before that night. 37 different arrests. So after Orisha was arrested, he was charged with attempted burglary, harassment, and criminal trespassing. But it's still, that video is just so frightening, and it really is scary to think of what could have happened if she didn't get the door closed and locked just in time.
There were 3 childhood friends who always swore they'd stick together. Best friends to the end, they used to say. Kyle was the grounded one, Dave was the brains, and then there was Jimmy, the wild card. Addicted to poker and chasing adrenaline like it was oxygen. Over time, Jimmy's addiction spiraled out of control. He racked up huge losses until one day, he found himself in $30,000 in debt to the kind of men who were very dangerous. They gave him a deadline, pay up or die. Panicked, Jimmy turned to Kyle and Dave. Desperate, he explained everything. After a long pause, they looked at him and said the words they always did, best friends to the end, and they meant it. They agreed to help, and Jimmy had a plan, a bank job. A in-and-out job, and $50,000 split 3 ways, enough to pay the debt and disappear for good. But as they pulled up to the bank, a black van screeched to a stop in front of them. Before they could react, 5 masked men jumped out, guns drawn. Everything went black. When Kyle and Dave woke up, they were gagged and tied on the floor of the van, heart pounding in the darkness. Then they saw Jimmy, sitting calmly, staring at them. "I'm sorry guys," he said, emotionless, "but I need more than 50 grand, and the organ market is booming these days."
Check out this chilling footage as an attacker attempts to steal a man's child right out of his own hands. I mean, this is incredibly disturbing stuff, and this is sadly the reality of the America we live in today. Did you know that every 40 seconds a child goes missing or is abducted in the United States? That means that while you're watching this video, 2 children will either go missing or be abducted. Every single day in the US, on average, about 2,100 children are reported missing. Out of those cases, about 800 of them usually end up being false alarms, but the disappearances of the other 1,300 children that go missing every single day aren't as easily explained. And in addition, every single day, on average, 33 children are abducted by someone who has no relation to them. Someone who isn't a family friend, a parent, someone in the bloodline, a total and random stranger. And what happens to these children? Those statistics are really hard to wrap your head around, but these children have to be going somewhere. And sadly, oftentimes, children vanish. In the United States alone, every single year, 800,000 different children are reported missing to authorities. And on average, about 4,600 of those children that go missing every single year are abducted by someone who has no relation to them. Sadly, oftentimes these children end up in the sex trafficking world, or they end up dead. We have a massive problem here in America, and it's a problem that politicians do not want to talk about. And these statistics, to me, are just incredibly, deeply disturbing.
Disney, bro. Disneyland.
Oh, the dark side of Disney?
The dark side, or like the dark ages of Disney. Back in like the mid 90s, early 2000s, they would have like a lot of malfunctions with rides, that's bloody period of time or whatever. And like they wouldn't really do anything about it. They would just try to cover everything up because
they want to have the reputation that
it's like a happy ass place to be, whatever. But I'm gonna talk about two cases. It was a worker who was dressed in the Pluto costume. He was 30 years old and he's been working there for like 8 years. During the parade of Beauty and the Beast, he got ran over by one of the...
What, you're talking about like the parade shit?
The float, yeah. He got ran over by that and tried to cover it up. And another thing too that I didn't know is that back then, like, they weren't allowed to call 911.
Nah, yeah, they wasn't, bro. They had to wait till they left the park, or if anybody died or anything like that, they would report it outside of the park, bro. They would never say that they got into an accident inside the park or got hurt inside the park.
And there was another case. There's this boat that when it docks, right, it's supposed to dock slow and nice, but this one keeps docking fast. And a lot of staff members, a lot of people would complain about it, saying like, this shit needs to be worked on, it needs maintenance, but they would just ignore it because like, it's fine, don't worry about it. And there was one time where it was docking, an employee that was outside where the dock is at saw a rope, tied the rope onto a pole, and that ended up, since the ship was going too fast, it was pulling the rope tight and ended up taking a chunk out of the boat, which ended up
somebody's face,
flying into somebody's face, ended up killing them. They tried to cover that up because when the investigators came to see what the fuck happened,
they said that he jumped off or something.
They basically stalled them for 4 hours while they had Disney employees clean up the mess so it would look like nothing really happened.
No fucking way.
Yeah.
When you were talking about this whole dark age and shit, I thought I was gonna mention, like, if you see the old like Mickey costumes, you could put it up and shit. Like, they look mad creepy and stuff.
You ever seen that video of...
Nothing scares me more than when someone vanishes into thin air. Hana Kobayashi disappeared on November 11th after missing her flight at LAX. But before she disappeared, she sent a string of bizarre text messages. The circumstances surrounding her disappearance are strange, so let's talk about it. So on November 8th of this year, Hana flew from her home in Maui to Los Angeles, and her plan was to then get on a connecting flight to New York to visit family and attend a concert. Hana was super excited to go to this concert and to the Museum of Modern Art in New York, as she is an aspiring photographer and a really good one at that. She spent thousands of dollars on this trip well in advance, so she was super excited about it. But after landing at LAX, Hana accidentally missed her connecting flight to New York, so to kill time while waiting for a last-minute flight to open up, she decided to go into downtown Los Angeles to sightsee. To be more specific, she went to the Grove Shopping Center, which is about 10 miles away from the airport. On November 9th, Hana was seen at a bookstore called Taschin, and a day later, she attended a Nike event in the same area where she took this photo. She's also seen in the background of a YouTube video at the same event. On November 11th, Hannah's mom texted her asking if she had made it to New York yet, in which Hannah replied, not yet. This is when things start to get strange. Hannah's friends and family then began receiving a string of bizarre text messages from Hannah's phone. In one text to a friend, Hannah said that she got tricked into pretty much giving away all of her funds from someone she thought she loved. In another text, she said, quote, "Deepackers wiped my identity, stole all of my funds, and have had me in a mind since Friday." End quote. The last time anyone heard from Hannah was this final text. She said she had a spiritual awakening, was charging her phone, and then heading back to the airport to go to New York. She said she might need some help getting there, and then it's a long story, but she told her family that she was scared. After this, Hannah vanished, and no one has heard from her since. Her phone soon went dead, but what's odd is that her family and friends say that these last texts don't really sound like her. She was reportedly calling them hun and babe, which is something that she doesn't really ever say. Her final post on Instagram was the same day, and it was a photo she took took at the Nike event the day prior. After a while of not hearing from Hannah and the odd text messages coming from her phone, her family reported her missing to the Los Angeles Police Department. During the investigation, police found that Hannah's phone last pinged at 4 p.m. on November 11th at LAX, which is the day she was sending those weird texts. But after this, her phone went dead. Adding to the mystery is the fact that before she disappeared, Hannah sent money via Venmo to 2 separate people who her family does not recognize. Recently, surveillance footage has emerged that shows Hannah the night she went missing, but it only brings more questions than answers. On the evening of November 11th, well after her phone died, Hannah was seen on security footage near the Crypto Arena, which is about 20 miles from the airport. Her family says that from that footage, it's clear that she wasn't in good condition. Hannah was then seen later that same night on security footage at the Hawthorne Lenox light rail station. She was not alone this time though. She was with an unknown man, and according to her family, she looked really tired and disassociated. It's not clear what happened to Hannah after this, and it's like she vanished into thin air, but her family believes that she has been abducted. The FBI is now involved in this case, and there have been multiple searches for Hannah, but she is still missing. Authorities are in the process of getting any extra security footage that they can find, as well as her phone records and bank statements. They're also trying to access all of her social media accounts to see if that can provide any clues into what happened to her. One thing that's important to note is that Hannah's ex-boyfriend was also traveling on that same flight from Maui to Los Angeles. They didn't sit together or even speak on the flight though, but he went because they'd already booked this trip prior to breaking up. He has reportedly been cooperative with authorities and Hannah's family, and he did board that connecting flight to New York that Hannah missed. I just wanted to point that out because it will come up when you research Hannah's case. Another thing that I wanted to bring up is that Hannah's family says that she doesn't suffer from any mental illness, and she's not on any medication that could possibly cause her to have an adverse reaction or anything like that. It's now been over a week since Hannah made any contact with her family, which is extremely out of character for her. She would never just leave her family like this. If you're in the downtown Los Angeles area or possibly even Skid Row or Compton, please keep your eyes peeled. These are some of her characteristics and what she was last seen wearing. You can also join this Facebook group to keep up with information directly from the family. If you have any information, please contact the number on the screen.
If her death was an accident, why did it take over an hour to call for help, and why was there blood found in her car? Shelley Malone was born in the 50s and loved horse riding. I mean, she literally lived for it. She grew up riding horses, she adored being in the outdoors, and she even told her mum when she was little that when she was older she was going to marry a horse. And because of this, she was a very experienced horse rider. She was almost the last person you'd expect to die in a horse riding accident. She lived in Virginia and was roughly 35 when she started dating a man called George Carhart. He actually lived in New York, but he regularly visited Shelley at her home. He would kind of travel back and forth to see her. And the pair had been together around 2 years when in October 1992, tragedy struck. Now, just before this, Shelley had actually confided in her friends and family that she really didn't see this relationship going much further. She wanted to call an end to it. And it's not 100% clear, but it kind of seems like this may have been because she did start to date somebody else. Before she'd properly called things off with George, she apparently went on a date with a local attorney that she liked. And again, it's not entirely clear whether George actually knew about this, but regardless, the weekend in question, George travelled to see Shelley. Another couple were with them at the time, Erica Sturmvoll and her boyfriend Carter Wiley. It was kind of a double date situation. It was on the 18th of October that all 4 of them were at Shelley's home and, according to the others, decided to do some horse riding, just her and Erica. The girls apparently went off on their horses together and the 2 males stayed back at Shelley's house. Now, Erica was the only surviving person during this incident, so obviously we kind of have to just go with what Erica said happened. So she said unexpectedly both horses were spooked while their 2 were riding the horses. She said that she was thrown off and fell to the left of her horse. She said she wasn't kind of seriously injured, but she then spotted Shelley had also been thrown off her horse about sort of 30 feet away. She claimed that she saw Shelley's horse kind of trampling on her by accident in the kind of chaos of it. She said the horse stamped on her legs, face, and head and kicked her in the head as well to try and get away. She described running up to Shelley and checking her pulse, and she said that she could already see that Shelley's face was turning purple. She said that she knew Shelley needed medical attention, so she decided to run back to the house to get help, but got lost. So it ultimately took paramedics an hour and a half to get to Shelley because of this getting lost. Unfortunately, when they did get to Shelley, she was dead. The medical examiner ruled the death accidental, but Shelley's family were immediately very skeptical of this. Shelley was very close with this horse, and there had never before been a time when she'd been kicked off the horse, or the horse had been spooked or trampled on her in any way. And a horse behavior expert even came forward to say that it would be unlikely that a horse would kind of trample over her and kick her in that way. And I'm not an expert on horses by any means. My mum actually did used to ride horses. But if any of you guys know, if you're a horse rider, if you've done horse riding before, if you know how horses behave, please do comment, because I'm really interested in this. She did have horseshoe imprints on her body, but that doesn't necessarily prove that the horse did kill her. There was a window of time where some staging could have potentially occurred. And I'm just trying to look at everything from every angle. Obviously, the ruling was that it was an accidental death, falling off a horse. However, there was other evidence that was incredibly disturbing, like the fact that there was human blood found in Shelley's car. Where did that blood come from? They claimed to not have tried to get Shelley in a car to get her to a hospital or anything. Frustratingly, the blood was never actually DNA tested because it would cost too much money, apparently. A detective stated that from the angle where the blood was found in the car on the passenger seat, it looked like it came from a head wound. There was then a very bizarre situation back at Shelley's house shortly after she died. George showed up at the property and was kind of fighting with people for her clothing. He was saying that he was adamant he was going to donate it to charity, but Shelley's family had arranged nothing of the sort, and obviously they kind of wanted to keep some mementos of their loved one. And then it's reported that George had apparently ditched some of her clothes at a local dump, and he'd also seemingly dumped a bunch of empty jewelry boxes, which some people felt indicated maybe he'd stolen the items and sold them. Now, as I said, officially the death remains ruled as accidental, but Shelley's family definitely believes there was more to this. They feel that maybe an argument broke out between some people at the house, and there was kind of a cover-up, and this horse story was used as a bit of a way to explain what had happened.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
Is this just really good magic or something way more sinister? Okay, so the video I'm about to show you might be the best magic trick ever, or something way more sinister. This man apparently has the abilities to control shadows. Just watch this magic trick and let's talk about it after.
Can you see the shadow? The shadow of your hands, of my hands, can you see the shadow? Okay, when I say 1, 2, 3, take your hands away. 1, 2, 3.
So yeah guys, how crazy is this? This man is either the best magician on the planet or has some sort of voodoo spells. I don't know how I would react if somebody did this to me, and I really never want to find out. This isn't altered or edited at all, so how in the world did he do this? Here's the video one more time, so let me know your thoughts on this in the comments.
Can you see the shadow? The shadow of your hands, of my hands, can you see the shadow? Okay, when I say 1, 2, 3, take your hands away. 1, 2, 3.
I took someone's life because I was obsessed with true crime stories. My name is Young-Yu Jung, and I'm a 23-year-old Korean woman. Like many people, I'm passionate about true crime and horror films, but one day I decided to take action. I became obsessed with the idea of killing someone. I began to devise a plan to find the perfect victim. So I signed up to a tutoring app pretending to be my mother. I scanned over 50 profiles on the app to find a young woman of 26 who taught English. She lived alone and tutored from home, which unfortunately made her the perfect victim for me. I dressed up as a student and went to her house after we agreed to meet. As soon as I entered her house, I stabbed her over 100 times until she died. Afterwards, I stuffed her body into suitcases and threw them into a river. I thought I'd committed the perfect crime, but it wasn't so. I was recorded by the security cameras with traces of blood entering and leaving her house on several occasions. What's more, the cab driver noticed these bloodstains, and after dropping me off, he contacted the police. Thanks to this, they managed to catch me. I'm currently in prison, and my case will be reviewed in 20 years. Do you think I deserve another chance?
This is an incredibly disturbing true crime update from New York. A 1-year-old child has been killed and 3 other children remain in hospital after substance paraphernalia was found at a nursery in the Bronx. The New York Police Department received a call on the 15th of September regarding 3 unconscious children. 4 children that were in the care of the staff at the Divino Nino daycare appeared to have come into contact with a substance that led to hospitalization of 3 of the children. We know that disturbingly 1 child was dead on arrival, and the cause of death is believed to be a direct result of the interaction with the substance. Police stated all 3 children were unresponsive and demonstrating symptoms of O exposure. A life-saving substance was administered to all 3 of these children in an attempt to save their lives. The children in hospital are thought to be an 8-month-old girl, a 1-year-old boy, and a 2-year-old boy. Following the 911 call, the police inspected the nursery. Disturbingly, they found a kilo press. Now, if you aren't aware, this is an item that is commonly used by substance dealers when packing large quantities of substances. This man stabbed his mum to death over Avril Lavigne tickets. In March 2008, 39-year-old Robert Lyons was living in Chicago. He'd been living with his mother for about a year, 61-year-old Linda Bolek. The pair had apparently not been getting on very well at all and had several arguments in the lead up to the fateful day. On the 14th of March, Robert saw that there were tickets going for an Avril Lavigne concert. He was so desperate to go that he would kill for these tickets. His mum actually refused to buy Robert the tickets, and in a rage, Robert hit her over the head with a bottle of champagne. He then stabbed her 9 times. The attack was actually so brutal that he ended up breaking the weapon. Not content with savagely killing his mother, he then poured household cleaner all over her before leaving the house. He then casually went to a bookshop, bought a book, and drove round for a few hours. Authorities ended up hunting him down and finding him at a local Hooters bar. Robert's defense in court was that he suffered with mental illness. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and was apparently not taking his medication at the time of the killing. He was eventually sentenced to 40 years in prison for this absolutely hideous crime.
Are all professional sports rigged? Watch this video and let me know what you think.
I was like, listen, the closeout game is the hardest game in your life. And they be like, why? And I can't say. Can't say. I can't say, but I'm like, no, fam, listen, like, this is the hardest game you'll ever play in your life.
Shit, nah, I'll tell it. Go ahead. You gotta be the vehicle. The vehicle. You gotta be the vehicle.
No, it's real though.
No, I remember we were about to play Game 7, 2012. So we were about to play the Celtics or whatever.
Game 7.
So I'm hyped as hell. I'm like, yeah, bro, we got a Game 7. Like, woo out the damn. Like, this gonna be lit. So Eldon's like, you know we're gonna have to win by 15 just to win by 1. So I'm like, what you mean? He's like, bro, this is the NBA. It's entertainment. Like, LeBron is in the Heat or waiting. Would you rather watch the Celtics or the Sixers play the Heat? I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm on the team. I wouldn't even watch the Sixers play the Heat type shit. Like, so we get in this game. You know how much money the NBA is gonna lose? Like this, you know, type shit. I'm like, I guess like a decent amount. It's like, would you watch that game next week if it was the Heat versus the Sixers? I'm like, nah. It's like, okay then. So like, that's why I'm telling you, take M's and M's from this. I'm like, what? He's like, millions of memories. Because this is entertainment.
Damn, that's a bar.
This place was built just to live out the dark fantasies of its creator, on some unsuspecting guests. It's H.H. Holmes's Hotel of Horrors. So Holmes moved to Chicago in the late 1800s so that he could open a hotel for the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. Apparently he was a hit amongst the ladies, even though I don't see it, but I guess it was slim pickings amongst those that didn't die of tuberculosis in their youth. And this hotel was full of nefarious instruments. Down in the basement, there was an incinerator that was person-sized. He had a chute that went from a windowless room all the way down to the basement. There were rooms that were either completely sealed or had too many doors in order to confuse guests. Guests would often complain about their doors being jiggled at night as if someone was trying to get in their room. And as the hotel was being built, workers would constantly complain about H.H. Holmes's weird behavior. There were reports that he would ask people working on the hotel if they were willing to kill another worker for him, and if they said no, he would fire them. And this, children, is why we need unions. Not to mention a shocking number of women were disappearing from the hotel. So this is the part of the video where you get to guess what he was doing in there, and we're gonna say it together on the count of 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3, skeleton harvesting. That's right, he was harvesting skeletons to sell to a local medical school. This only lasted for 2 years until he was found and convicted of murder, but some reports say he killed up to 200 people in there, mostly women. Some people also believe that he was Jack the Ripper, but that is for another video. Anyways, we're going to talk about more scary homes later. Bye!
Pretended to be the perfect mom on TikTok, but ended up killing my 3-year-old daughter. My name is Nicholas Priest, and I'm a 23-year-old American girl. I used to post videos of me dancing with my 3-year-old daughter, Kaylee. I pretended to have a very good relationship with her. I made people like me. But I was hiding a very dark secret. I didn't love my daughter. I didn't care about her. I just used her to gain subscribers. When the camera was off, I beat her brutally every day and didn't even look at her. She was a burden to me. I started dating Callum. We were totally in love and sometimes even beat my daughter together. On August 9th, 2020, I invited my boyfriend to my house to make love. We locked Kaylee in a room while we did our thing. However, she began to cry very loudly. She was just getting in the way of my sex life. So, my boyfriend and I hit her so hard that she started vomiting and fainting. After that, we laid her on the bed and went back to our thing. When we finished, we noticed a strange silence in my daughter's room. And when we went in, she wasn't breathing. We called the ambulance, but it was too late. The autopsy revealed that Kaylee had broken ribs beforehand. It was also revealed that her death had not been instantaneous, but that she had been suffering for hours. My boyfriend was sentenced to 14 years and I to 15 for involuntary manslaughter. Do you think this is a fair sentence?
This is 21-year-old Daniel Abed Khalif. Daniel was a serving soldier in the British Army working as a computer network engineer for the Royal Corps of Signals. However, earlier this year, Daniel was charged with terror offences after placing 3 canisters with wires at an RAF base in Stafford with the intention of inducing the belief that the canisters could explode or ignite. He's also accused of eliciting information that could be useful to a terrorist. He was arrested earlier this year after an investigation by Scotland Yard's Counter-Terrorism Command, and he was being held at HMP Wandsworth in southwest London. But yesterday, on Wednesday 6th of September, he managed to escape. He was working as a chef in the prison's kitchen and he managed to cling on to the bottom of a delivery van and be transported out of the prison grounds and into London. Police have absolutely no idea where Daniel is right now. Airports and ferry ports are now on high alert and police are asking the public not to approach Daniel if he's spotted, but to dial 999 immediately. He was wearing a white chef's shirt, red checked trousers and brown steel toe cap boots, although it's possible he may have changed into something else and it's unclear whether he had help. Doubts are now being raised about the security at Wandsworth Prison and why Daniel was being held there in the first place, with it being a Category B prison. Terror suspects are usually held at Category A prisons such as Belmarsh. I'll be keeping an eye out for the live updates and let's all hope that he's found soon.
Just as this young mother was escaping from her abusive partner, the unthinkable happened. This case is the perfect example of why people are so afraid to leave abusive partners. 19-year-old Amelia Arnold was a devoted mother. She lived in Stevenage and had been dating 22-year-old Jack Wall. Jack was reportedly abusive to her throughout the relationship and she'd actually sought help from a CBT therapist. Amelia confided in her therapist that the verbal and physical abuse started in August 2012. She reported how Jack had threatened to snap her neck as she slept. On one occasion, he threw a table and a pair of scissors at her. He had hit her around the head and kicked her, but she was too scared to report it to police. She was really frightened because he'd threatened to kill her if she told anybody, and she was right to be afraid. Her therapist was obviously concerned and signposted her to the Women's Resource Centre as well as referring her to child services. Amelia seemed to be really trying to get out of the relationship, and in September 2012 she reached out to the council. She requested their help in getting rehoused with her little girl away from Jack. On the 8th of November, however, Jack confronted Amelia and the pair got into an argument. He hit her around the head using a dumbbell-like object and then strangled her. Once she was dead, he took wires from his games console and tied her body up. He then called his uncle, 42-year-old Joseph Potter, who shockingly agreed to come and help him dispose of her body. He agreed to bury her with him in the local woods. Amelia's body was discovered in Hatfield in the local woodlands 3 days later. Jack would go on to admit manslaughter in court but claim he never meant to kill Amelia. The jury, though, saw straight through this story and found him guilty of murder. He was given life in prison with a minimum of 19 years, and his uncle got just 2.5 years. When this girl vanished, it would be a decade before a random member of the public solved the mystery. It was September 2010, and Paige Johnson was just 17 years old. Paige was from Florence in Kentucky and had a 2-year-old daughter. For that reason, it was very out of character when she suddenly vanished. She was last seen on the 23rd of September driving round Covington. She had been with 22-year-old Jacob Bumpass. The last time Paige's family had seen her was actually the night of the 22nd. She'd asked her mum if she could go to her sister's apartment in Covington. Jacob claimed that he had dropped her off around 1 a.m. that morning not far from her sister's apartment. Initial searches were unsuccessful and there was no sign of Paige. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. Her case went cold and her family was understandably confused and heartbroken. Rumours were rife in the area about what may have happened to Paige, and many pointed the finger at Jacob. He was rumoured to have been very uncooperative with police. However, it would be a whole decade before there was any news. On March the 22nd, 2020, a member of the public from Williamsburg was out hunting for deer antlers. Horrifically, he came across a human skull. His wife called police to report the finding, and police headed over to inspect the scene. There, they also discovered a rib bone. Sadly, the remains were confirmed to be Paige. In July that same year, Jacob was finally arrested. He was charged with abuse of a corpse and tampering with evidence. Frustratingly, though, police didn't have enough evidence to charge him with homicide. Due to the state of the decomposition, there was no evidence of trauma and obviously just the small remains of a skeleton. That meant there was also no way to do any toxicology tests. They couldn't determine how she died and whether or not it was intentional. They could, however, prove that Jacob was guilty of leaving Paige's body in a wooded area, and they managed to track where both Paige and Jacob's phones had been that night. Jacob's phone pinged at around 4 a.m. on the night in question, just over a mile from where Paige's body was found. He was found guilty of the original charges and given just 4 years in prison.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
On May 27, 2018, this man was pulled over by a police officer because he had a broken taillight on his vehicle. When the officer approached Stuart Weldon's vehicle, however, he looked in the back seat and noticed that there was a woman back there tied up, bound and gagged. She somehow managed to scream out that she had been kidnapped, and the officers placed Stuart under arrest. Upon being interviewed by the police, the woman then claimed that Stuart had held her captive for an entire month. And during that month, he had tortured her, beaten her with a hammer, and repeatedly assaulted her. She was then treated for multiple injuries, including a broken jaw, stab wounds, marks from being hit by a blunt instrument, and even a leg infection. After Stuart was arrested, however, his mom called the police and stated that she had noticed a foul odor emanating from Stuart's home. And after police obtained a search warrant and headed to Stuart's house, pictured right here, they were shocked by what they found. In the basement of the home, which Stuart shared with his mother, they found the decomposing body of a woman. They then searched the property and found another body under a tarp and another body in the garage. These bodies belonged to 3 local missing women. 26-year-old Kayla Escalante, 34-year-old America Lydon, and 47-year-old Ernestine Ryans. As it turned out, Stuart was a career criminal who had been arrested 14 different times in the past. He had been arrested on charges of assault, of assaulting a police officer, of burglary, of fleeing from the police. So it was very clear that Stuart wasn't a very good man. But like I said, no one could have expected the discovery of those 3 bodies rotting in his mother's home that day. As it turned out, Stuart had kidnapped these 3 women at different times, held them captive in his torture room in his basement, repeatedly assaulted them day after day for extended periods of time. Then when he had gotten sick of the women, he had murdered them and buried them there on the property. Thankfully, Stuart is serving 3 consecutive life sentences, meaning he'll never see the light of day outside of prison again. But I can't just help think about how crazy it is that him being pulled over for a broken taillight was the entire reason why this entire story broke. And if the police officer hadn't pulled him over that day, then those 3 women could possibly have never been found.
This is Slaughterhouse, the ISIS video nobody should ever watch explained. The video that I'm about to explain depicts the brutal execution of 15 men, and this graphic video was released on the 12th of December 2016. The video was filmed in a slaughterhouse in northeastern Syria, and the 15 men that were executed were accused of spying on behalf of an international alliance led by the United States. The video is about 4.5 minutes long, and it opens up showing the captured men who are going to be executed. It shows them being apprehended, handcuffed, and then thrown into pickup trucks. The video then skips forward and you see the setting for the executions. It's a large slaughterhouse with meat hooks dangling from the ceiling. The captives are then moved into the building, essentially hurdled and moving like cattle to the corner of the room. All of the victims are on their knees, handcuffed in the corner, and then an ISIS member wearing all white approaches, and he then starts grabbing the heads of the victims and putting them down. It's like he's playing a sick game of eeny, meeny, miny, moe. The killer then does this a couple times before he picks his first victim. The first victim is then dragged away from the group and laid down next to a blood drain. Immediately, one of the ISIS members takes a razor-sharp knife and slashes the victim's throat. He is then hosed down by water as the blood goes down the drain. The camera focuses on the victim, and even though there is loud music playing, you can still hear the victim gasping for a breath. It's also worth saying that these executions are filmed in HD, which make them that much harder to watch. The first victim eventually passes away and is then hung by the feet on a meat hook, so the blood can drain from his body. After the first execution takes place, the video then shows a montage of several men getting the same thing done to them, having their throats slashed and being left to bleed out. Many disturbing graphic shots are shown during this segment, including this one shot that had the camera in the drain, so that you can see the blood flow and drain away. You also hear the sounds of the execution because there is no music in the background at this point. As the video continues, you see 2 men hung by their feet. However, unlike the other men, these victims haven't been executed yet. The camera then shows a close-up of the victim's face, and he looks content with his fate. 2 ISIS members then simultaneously slash the 2 victims' throats who are hanging by their feet. At this point, you really see the reality of what's happening in this video. The slaughterhouse floors are completely covered in blood, and you see 14 bodies hung by their feet on meat hooks like animals. At this point, there is 1 victim remaining. The victim kneels beside the executioner with a knife, who reads a brief statement. The victim is crying and shaking as the reality of what's happening is settling in. Once the executioner finishes the statement, the final victim is laid on the floor and has his throat slit like the other 14 victims. But the final victim had a lot more struggle as his throat was being slashed. His legs were waving around in a last attempt to get away from the executioner. He then bleeds out and the final body is then dragged away in a cinematic nature. And this is where the video concludes. Just like all ISIS videos, the production and quality is extremely high level. They film these executions in a movie-type style, and nobody understands why ISIS makes the videos like this. But many people think it's to recruit new members. It's like they try to make these videos look appealing, which is just very strange. Never go looking for this video for obvious reasons, and this is just another example of how cruel our world actually is. It's crazy that human beings do these types of things to each other on a daily basis. It's absolutely sickening. This is the most disturbing cartel murder ever, and this is the trigger warning. Maria Fernanda Garcia Alvarez was a 16-year-old girl who was executed by some drug cartel members on suspicion of investigating against them. She was missing since July 15th, 2021, and a few months later, a gruesome video of her execution began circulating on gore sites and Reddit. The video is 2 minutes and 31 seconds long, and the setting looks like some sort of forest or some trail in the woods near a forest. When the video starts, Maria is on her knees with her hands tied behind her back. She is wearing jeans and a white blouse shirt. And the look on her face will keep you up at night. She is surrounded by at least 3 gang members, the cameraman, the one holding a gun against her head, and the other holding a pretty long knife against her throat. The opening 50 seconds is your usual cartel interrogation. The interrogation is translated to, interrogator demands her name. She replies, Maria Fernanda Garcia Alvarez. The interrogator then asked, who was the person who ordered you to infiltrate us? Maria replies, Fernando Mendoza. The interrogator then asked, who planned all the stuff you're doing? She says Fernando and Francisco. The interrogator then says, tell us the people who infiltrated us. Give us nicknames. She replies Oscar and then another name that can't be made out. Finally, he asked, "Who did you report to on everything we did?" Maria said, "Fernando Mendoza." The killer then ends the negotiation by saying, "Now you'll see why you don't want to play with us." As the video plays out, it is extremely hard to watch. Maria is panic breathing and on the verge of tears. Her killer then proceeds to cut into her throat while holding his hand over her mouth and bringing the knife back and forth like a saw. And while watching, you can instantly tell the knife isn't sharp enough to cut clean through a neck, which makes this 100 times worse for Maria. Maria is screaming and screaming while crying hysterically. The sound of this is horrific and will keep you up at night. Eventually, the knife gets through the skin and into her throat. And at this point, Maria's screams change pitch dramatically. She tries to struggle, but the other man holds her in place. Her screams get deeper as the killer continues to cut and cut and cut. For a split second, she manages to move her head, which frees the killer's hand from her mouth. She then lets out a desperately loud scream that you wish you've never heard. The killer then regains control and puts his hand back over her mouth and continues cutting. She is still screaming after a minute of having her throat cut. At this point, it seems like the killer is losing his composure, I would say, for Maria's screams, and then takes the tip of the knife and puts it into her throat and pushes it down with his palm, right into Maria's windpipe, and at this point, her screams change in pitch again. You almost hear the scream and air leave her throat. The killer then moves the knife side to side to try and make the wound bigger, and after all this, Maria is still conscious. The killer then proceeds to stab Maria in the stomach a couple times, and seems desperate to get the job done. And it's extremely apparent that this is his first time doing anything like this. He then proceeds cutting her throat and stabs the knife again into her body. At this point, Maria's body then goes limp. The killer then looks at the camera and throws up the peace sign, and the video ends. This is truly one of the most sickening cases I've ever researched, and it's a shame stuff like this happens daily. I beg you to never go searching for this video because it's really sickening and sad, and it will honestly just ruin your day or might even ruin weeks of your life.
The murder and torture of Junko Furuta is one of the most disturbing stories I've ever read. We're going to cover some extremely graphic details with this story in order to tell the full story, so please, viewer discretion is advised. So this is Junko Furuta. She was born on January 18th, 1971. And eventually she would be murdered at the age of 17 after being trapped in a virtual hell for 40 days. So in school, Junko was a very great student. She barely ever missed class, her friends loved her, she was popular, and she one day dreamed of becoming an idol singer. But all those dreams would be shattered in November of 1988. That's when these four teenage boys come into the picture. Hiroshi Miyano, Joe Ogura, Shinji Minato, and Yasushi Watanabe. Throughout all of their youth, these four boys were hardcore criminals. They had damaged school property, committed a number of thefts, assaulted people, and not one of them was a good person. So on November 25th, 1988, two of these boys walked around the town that they lived in with the intent of assaulting and stealing money from a woman. Somehow, by chance, they came across Junko. As she was coming home from work that day riding her bike, one of the boys kicked her off the bike and the other boy pretended to just come across her and wanted to help her. So, trusting that this guy would help her, she followed this boy and he led her to a warehouse where he assaulted her. He then assaulted her in a hotel. And after this, he called his other friends and told them that he had abducted this girl, Junko. So at about 3 a.m., he took Junko to a park where the other three boys were waiting. They found a notebook in her backpack and said that they now know her address, and if she tries to escape, they'll have the Yakuza or the Japanese Mafia kill her. And they then took her to a house where they gang assaulted her. So this house that they brought Junko to was owned by one of the boys' parents, and they held her captive in the house. After they abducted her, they realized that her parents would be filing police reports and looking for her, so they had Junko call her mom and dad and say that she had run away and she was safe. But in reality, she was being held hostage in this home with these four boys. And Junko would be held in this house for 40 days of pure hell. And at this point, I'm going to really advise you, if you have a weak stomach, to scroll on, because this is where the story gets really, really disturbing. And this is a case that I could never stop thinking about. So for the next 40 days while Junko was held hostage, these 4 boys, along with other boys and men that they invited to come into the home, repeatedly beat, tortured, and assaulted her. Many times they assaulted her in groups. And the torture that they inflicted on her is some of the most disturbing stuff I've ever read about. While in groups, they would often take turns doing whatever they wanted to Junko. They forcibly shaved her pubic hair. They forced her to dance in front of the group without any clothing on. They forced her to touch areas while they watched. And they would often kick her out to the balcony with no clothing and leave her there overnight. They also inserted lots of different things into her private areas. Things that included a bottle, a lit match, a metal rod, and they force-fed her copious amounts of milk and alcohol. At one point, these boys even made her smoke multiple cigarettes at once and inhale paint thinner. And in one particularly gruesome incident, one of these boys doused Junko's arms and legs in lighter fluid and set her on fire. And keep in mind, the whole time they were punching, slapping, assaulting her throughout all of this. They also refused to feed her any food and only gave her water, milk, and alcohol. At one point throughout these 40 days, Junko became unable to move due to the infection of her injuries and the extent of her injuries, so she became confined to the floor of the room. And they made her defecate and go to the bathroom on herself, and they never cleaned it. So on January 4th, 1989, one night after one of the boys lost a game the previous evening, he decided to take his anger out on Junko. So he doused her in lighter fluid, set fire to her body, and she awoke and tried to put it out, but it was no good and she slowly collapsed. The boys then began to punch and kick her unresponsive body. They lit a candle and dripped hot wax across her face. They placed 2 short candles under her eyelids and lit them, and they even forced her to consume her own urine. Eventually, after she was kicked, she collapsed onto a stereo unit and went into a fit of convulsions, but that didn't stop the attackers. Even though, according to the police report, she was bleeding profusely and pus was pouring out from her infected wounds, these boys continued to savagely attack her. They then dropped a heavy exercise ball onto her stomach multiple times. People think this might have been what finally killed Junko. But this entire ordeal lasted for 2 hours of beatings, torture, and pain, and that night she died. So after freaking out and realizing that Junko was dead, the boys then placed her body in a 55-gallon tank and filled it to the brim with wet concrete. And throughout her ordeal, Junko had told her captors many times that she regretted only not being able to watch the finale episode of her favorite show titled Dragonfly. And so, one of the boys actually found a videotape of that final episode and placed it in there with Junko's body. He would later tell investigators, though, that he didn't do this because he pitied Junko. He did this because he didn't want her ghost to come back and haunt him. So this obviously ended the story of Junko, but eventually, after the police questioned one of the boys for a separate assault and kidnapping that he had committed, he confessed to her murder. And the next day they went and found this drum, and of course they found Junko inside of it. Now, this is going to infuriate you if you're still here. The longest sentence handed out to one of these boys was 20 years, and that was the longest sentence. And the other 3 boys got less than 10 years each for all of these horrific crimes. So all of them are out free in society right now. This is a story that continues to haunt the people in Japan, and if you're still here right now, I'm sure that you're going to be haunted by this story. There are details that I could not include in this TikTok because they were simply too graphic, but thanks for listening, and yeah, this story is one that disgusts me. I cannot believe that they didn't get these sentences that were higher. It's just hard to believe that this happened in real life and that human beings are capable of being this evil. It's just shocking.